On October 12, 1983, at approximately 6:47 a.m., a woman named Anna Harper bid her two children farewell, informed her husband of an early work meeting, and departed their suburban Virginia residence. She carried only her purse and a single briefcase. She never returned. Her vehicle was discovered 3 days later in a long-term parking lot at Dallas International Airport, keys still in the ignition. By the time federal investigators elucidated the events, Anna Harper, the PTA volunteer, the devoted mother, the dependable defense contractor employee, was already thousands of miles away, seated in a debriefing room in Moscow, savoring tea and responding to queries in flawless Russian. This was because Anna Harper was not who she claimed to be. She had never been. This narrative recounts how a Soviet intelligence officer maintained a clandestine existence in the heart of American suburbia for nearly a decade. It details how she transmitted classified intelligence to the KGB while simultaneously baking cookies for school fundraisers and attending Little League games. It also elaborates on the choice she made when the noose began to tighten, a decision that would forever leave its mark on her family. This is a story about deception, ideology, and the stark calculations of espionage during one of history's most volatile periods. Its genesis lies not in Virginia, but in a training facility outside Leningrad in the early 1970s, where a young woman was being meticulously prepared for a mission that would shape the trajectory of her life. According to declassified KGB records unveiled decades later, her true name was Yelena Mikhalovna Sokolova, born in 1947 in Minsk, to parents with unimpeachable party credentials. Her father served as a mid-level official within the Ministry of Agriculture. Her mother was an educator, and Yelena herself was recognized early on as a promising candidate for intelligence work. She possessed intelligence, adaptability, and crucially, an almost uncanny ability to blend in. Former instructors characterized her as unremarkable in the most advantageous sense. She was the type of person one could pass on the street numerous times without recollection. Her visage seemed to adapt to her surroundings, and she could alter her demeanor to suit any assigned role. Her English was delivered with only the slightest hint of an accent, a testament to intensive study since adolescence. By the time she completed her training program in 1973, she had undergone a complete metamorphosis. She was equipped with a new name, a fabricated history, and a specific mission. The plan, at least in theory, was straightforward. Elena was to infiltrate the United States under a distinct guise, one that would avoid raising flags with immigration authorities. A name with Polish origins, aligning with her cover story as a postgraduate student from Eastern Europe. She assumed the identity of Anna Kowalik, complete with a Polish passport, academic records from the University of Warsaw, and a meticulously crafted narrative of escaping the communist bloc in pursuit of opportunities in the West. It was a plausible legend. Poland had a history of citizens emigrating to America, and her stated reasons for wishing to study in the United States would appear entirely reasonable to immigration officers. She was not expected to immediately abscond with nuclear secrets or photograph classified documents. The KGB operated on a significantly longer timeline. They were planting seeds intended to yield results years down the line, strategically positioning assets who could furnish valuable intelligence over the span of a career rather than a singular operation. In 1974, when Yelena, now Anna Kowalik, arrived in New York City with a student visa and a suitcase packed with carefully selected American attire, she was one of many similar operatives being discreetly integrated into Western society, constituting a vast network spanning continents and operating within the clandestine sphere of the Cold War. Her initial year in the United States was dedicated to precisely what her cover story outlined: attending postgraduate courses at a mid-tier university in New Jersey, pursuing a degree in electrical engineering, forming friendships, attending social gatherings, and absorbing the nuances of American life. She engaged in occasional dating, none of it serious, and worked part-time at a campus library to supplement the modest stipend managed through a series of discreetly laundered financial channels. To all who knew her, she was simply Anna Kowalik, another international student striving for success in America, courteous but reserved, diligent but not driven to extremes, the kind of individual who receded into the background of any group photograph. This was the precise objective. In 1975, she met David Harper at a community gathering in Princeton. David, age 32, was an engineer himself, recently divorced, and somewhat reserved in social settings. He was employed by a medium-sized defense contractor engaged in business with the Department of Defense, primarily handling routine matters such as circuit boards and communication systems. While not making headlines, their work was not publicly disseminated. Their courtship began in the autumn of that year, and by all accounts it was a genuine relationship. At least from David's perspective, he was infatuated with her. Friends from that era would later attest that he found her intelligent, kind, and refreshingly grounded compared to previous acquaintances. Whether Anna reciprocated these sentiments remains unknowable, but she performed her role with conviction. They exchanged vows in April 1976 during a modest ceremony attended by a handful of David's relatives and a few friends Anna had acquired at university. No guests were present from her side. She explained this by citing complications with travel visas for her family in Poland, a detail David accepted without reservation, as he had no grounds for suspicion. Upon becoming David's wife, Anna Kowalczyk transitioned into Anna Harper, and it was under this thoroughly Americanized identity that she would execute her operations for the ensuing 7 years. The marriage served multiple strategic purposes. It provided her with a more profound and enduring cover, one significantly more difficult to dismantle should any inquiries arise. The metamorphosis from Anna Kowalczyk, Polish immigrant student, to Anna Harper, American wife and mother, imparted layers of legitimacy that rendered her virtually imperceptible to counterintelligence scrutiny. It also granted her access, not directly, but proximity to an individual employed in the defense industry, someone who might inadvertently share information at the dinner table or leave documents unattended at home. More significantly, however, it conferred a level of credibility that a solitary foreign woman living alone could not achieve in 1970s America. Married women with families were not generally suspected of being foreign intelligence agents. They were presumed to be precisely who they appeared to be, which was the ultimate objective. By 1977, Anna and David had relocated to a tranquil neighborhood in Mayland, Virginia, a suburb bordering Washington, D.C. Anna had also given birth to their first child, a daughter named Emily. A second child, a son named Michael, was born in early 1979. During this period, Anna was employed, having secured a position as a technical analyst at the same defense contractor where her husband worked, a company named Advanced Systems Technologies, holding contracts with the Army and Navy for communication equipment. She had submitted her application in late 1976, and her background check, which encompassed a review of her Polish immigration, records, and academic credentials, yielded no adverse findings. The persona, meticulously constructed by the KGB as Anna Kowalczyk, was sufficiently detailed to withstand scrutiny, at least to the standard level prevalent at the time. By mid-1977, Anna Harper possessed a security clearance and access to information that, while not top secret, was nevertheless classified and highly valuable to a foreign intelligence service. This marked the phase where the operation shifted from long-term positioning to active intelligence acquisition. Anna's responsibilities at Advanced Systems Technologies involved reviewing technical specifications and facilitating coordination between engineering teams and government liaisons. Consequently, she encountered a continuous flow of documents pertaining to military contracts, project schedules, equipment capabilities, and budget allocations. Much of this material was routine, comprising details that would hold little significance for the average person. However, to an intelligence analyst in Moscow, even seemingly mundane information could prove useful, revealing patterns, strategic priorities, supply chain vulnerabilities, and technological deficiencies. Thus, Anna commenced the deliberate and methodical process of transmitting information to her handlers. The methods employed were intentionally low-tech and gradual. She refrained from photographing documents or copying files onto microfilm, at least not frequently, owing to the elevated risk of apprehension during such activities. Instead, she committed details to memory, composed summaries in coded language, and conveyed them during brief, carefully orchestrated encounters with a contact operating under diplomatic cover at the Soviet embassy in Washington. These meetings, known in intelligence jargon as brush passes, occurred in public settings such as parks, shopping centers, and museum lobbies. locations where individuals could briefly cross paths without attracting undue attention. On occasion, she would deposit materials in a dead drop, a pre-established hiding place from which her contact could retrieve them later. This might involve a dislodged brick in a garden wall or a hollowed-out tree stump in Rock Creek Park, sites meticulously surveyed and tested well in advance of their utilization. For years, this system proved effective. Anna furnished information not continuously but at regular intervals. A report here, a set of specifications there. The KGB received what they deemed a consistent stream of valuable intelligence. The information acquired wasn't revolutionary, nothing that would alter the trajectory of the Cold War, but it was substantial, dependable, and originated from an individual who had previously demonstrated herself to be both disciplined and prudent. Back in Virginia, Anna's existence proceeded along its predictable suburban path. She participated in parent-teacher conferences, organized birthday celebrations, and contributed her time to the elementary school library. She and David had established a rhythm. He dedicated long hours to his work. She managed the domestic sphere and her own professional responsibilities. On weekends, their activities mirrored those of other families. Excursions to the zoo, meals at casual dining establishments, undertakings related to home improvement. To all outward observers, their lives embodied the American ideal. However, beneath the surface, the pressure was immense. Living a clandestine existence isn't akin to simply switching between two distinct personas. It's a perpetual state of enactment, a ceaseless mental and emotional balancing act. Every exchange, every interaction, every casual inquiry from a neighbor or a colleague had to be filtered through the lens of the fabricated narrative, assessed for potential risk, and responded to in a manner consistent with Anna Harper's manufactured history. Compounding this was the reality of her actions, the profound breach of trust with everyone in her vicinity, including her husband and children. Whether she experienced remorse for this is not publicly known. Former Soviet intelligence officers who have openly discussed comparable operations describe a mentality where ideology and duty supersede personal sentiments. Nevertheless, it's difficult to conceive that there weren't moments in the quiet hours of the night or the early dawn when the sheer burden of her dual existence became almost unbearable. By the early 1980s, the intelligence landscape was undergoing a transformation. The Cold War, which had maintained a relatively stable, albeit tense, equilibrium for much of the 1970s, was entering a more assertive phase. The Soviet Union's incursion into Afghanistan in 1979 had escalated tensions, and the election of Ronald Reagan in 1980 ushered in a new, more confrontational approach to American foreign policy. Concurrently, American counterintelligence agencies were becoming more sophisticated, increasingly wary, and more intently focused on uncovering Soviet operatives who had infiltrated American institutions. The FBI's counterintelligence division was expanding. Novel technologies were being implemented to monitor communications and track suspicious activities. Moreover, within the intelligence community, there was a growing recognition that the Soviets had likely established long-term sleeper agents in positions throughout governmental and industrial sectors. Anna, who had been active for close to a decade by this juncture, was still regarded as a valuable operative by her handlers. However, the KGB was also cognizant that the longer an operative remained in place, the greater the probability of detection. Time was not in her favor, and the demands placed upon her were escalating. In 1982, she received instructions to procure more granular intelligence concerning a particular project underway at Advanced Systems Technologies, a communications encryption system being developed for NATO forces in Europe. This represented a departure from the routine reports she had previously furnished. It was a high-priority objective, something Moscow desired sufficiently to warrant undertaking increased risks. Consequently, Anna embraced those risks. She began extending her hours at the office, volunteering for additional assignments that would grant her access to the pertinent documents. She surreptitiously duplicated documents whenever feasible, photographing them with a miniaturized camera provided by her handler, equipment that appears almost primitive now, but was state-of-the-art tradecraft at the time. She transmitted this material through her established channels, and for a period of a few months, the operation seemed to proceed successfully. However, in the spring of 1983, something went awry. The precise nature of the error has never been conclusively ascertained. Yet, according to information that surfaced years later, it involved a document that Anna had photocopied and subsequently failed to return to its designated location. It was a minor oversight, the sort of lapse that might have gone unnoticed under different circumstances. But, in this instance, it was detected. A security officer conducting a routine inventory of classified materials identified the discrepancy, which initiated a more thorough inquiry. This, in turn, raised questions regarding who had accessed the file and at what times. Anna's name emerged during this review, not initially as the primary suspect, but as an individual who had been present in the vicinity during the relevant time frame. This marked the beginning of the end, although Anna was not immediately aware of it. The FBI, having been alerted to the potential security breach, commenced a discreet, systematic investigation. They examined access logs, interviewed employees, and began constructing a chronological account of individuals' whereabouts. Anna's name continued to appear peripherally in this investigation, never quite at the focal point, but consistently present, exhibiting subtle anomalies that were difficult to articulate but impossible to dismiss. Then, one of the investigators, a seasoned counterintelligence agent named Richard Callahan, who had dedicated his entire career to pursuing Soviet spies, observed something peculiar in Anna Harper's background. It wasn't anything overtly significant, merely a minor inconsistency in her employment history, a gap of a few months in 1974 that did not fully align with the information she had provided on her security clearance applications. Callahan retrieved her file and began a deeper examination, cross-referencing her records with other databases and contacting associates at different agencies. The more he investigated, the more these inconsistencies accumulated. Her Polish passport and immigration records, upon closer scrutiny, revealed irregularities suggesting they might be sophisticated forgeries. Her academic transcripts from the University of Warsaw proved challenging to authenticate through standard channels. And when Callahan attempted to locate individuals who might have known her during her time in Poland before immigrating to America, his efforts yielded no results. It was as though Anka Kowalik had simply materialized in 1974, fully formed, with no discernible prior history. By the summer of 1983, the FBI had initiated a comprehensive counterintelligence investigation into Anna Harper. While they did not yet possess definitive proof of her being a Soviet agent, they had amassed sufficient circumstantial evidence to warrant surveillance. Her telephone was intercepted, her movements were monitored, and agents discreetly interviewed individuals in her life, posing general questions about her conduct, habits, and background. David Harper was kept unaware of this investigation, at least initially, as the FBI sought to avoid alerting Anna and also maintained uncertainty regarding David's potential complicity. From their perspective, everyone within Anna's social circle was considered a potential suspect until proven otherwise. For several months, the surveillance yielded no definitive findings. Anna, assuming she was indeed a spy, was acting with extreme caution. She commuted to work, returned home, attended to her children, participated in school events, and displayed no outward indication of being aware of the surveillance. However, in September 1983, a shift occurred. One of the FBI's surveillance teams observed Anna making an unscheduled trip to Washington, D.C. on a Saturday afternoon, informing her husband that she needed to attend to errands. She drove to a shopping center in Georgetown, parked her vehicle, and spent approximately 40 minutes browsing in various stores. During this time, she briefly crossed paths with a man who was later identified as a known Soviet intelligence officer operating under diplomatic immunity. The encounter lasted less than 10 seconds, merely long enough for them to pass within a few feet of each other. To the surveillance team, it appeared to be a brush pass, a fleeting moment where materials or information could have been exchanged undetected. This was the evidence the FBI had been anticipating. Not enough for an arrest, not yet, but sufficient to validate their growing suspicions. The investigation immediately escalated. Additional resources were allocated, more agents were assigned, and the surveillance became more rigorous and comprehensive. The objective was to observe Anna until she re-established contact with her handler, accumulate sufficient evidence to construct an unassailable case, and then apprehend her in a manner that would enable the FBI to dismantle her entire network affiliation. However, they underestimated the vigilance of Anna's handlers and the swiftness with which the KGB could react when sensing that one of their operatives was endangered. In early October 1983, Anna received a signal from her handler, an urgent message conveyed through a prearranged method indicating her immediate need to depart the country. The specifics of how this signal was transmitted remain unclear, but the most probable explanation involves a coded message within a newspaper advertisement or a brief telephone call employing a pre-established code phrase. Regardless of the method, the message was unambiguous. Her cover had been compromised, the Americans were closing in, and she had to extract herself before it was too late. Consequently, on the morning of October 12th, Anna Harper made a decision that would profoundly shape the remainder of her life and the lives of those she left behind. She awoke early, prepared her children for school, prepared breakfast for David, and behaved as though it were merely another ordinary day. She informed David of an early work meeting, which was not unusual. She bid her children, Emily and Michael, goodbye, also a customary occurrence. And then she departed, carrying her handbag and a briefcase. Within that briefcase, according to investigators' later reconstruction, were approximately $15,000 in cash, a set of fraudulent identity documents provided by the KGB years prior for precisely such an emergency, and likely little else. She departed, leaving behind her wedding band, family photographs, personal possessions, everything that tethered her to the existence she had cultivated over the preceding 9 years. Her car was driven to Dallas International Airport, where it was parked in a long-term facility and subsequently abandoned with the keys still in the ignition. From that point, she likely utilized a taxi or a shuttle service to reach an alternative destination, changed her attire, and employed fraudulent documentation to board a sequence of flights that would ultimately transport her beyond the nation's borders. The precise itinerary she followed has never been definitively established. However, intelligence analysts surmise she first journeyed to Mexico City, proceeded to Havana, and from there, onward to Moscow. The entirety of this transit would have transpired in under 48 hours. By the time the FBI ascertained her absence, she was already beyond their investigative grasp, situated in a secure location within the Soviet Union. There, she underwent debriefing by KGB officials eager to extract every detail she had acquired during her tenure in America. Returning to Virginia, David Harper arrived home from work on October 12th to discover his wife missing. Initially, he presumed she was delayed or had opted to go out post-work without informing him. It was only as evening yielded to night and she remained absent and uncontacted that he began to feel apprehension. He attempted to reach her office, but no colleagues had seen her. He contacted friends, but none were aware of her whereabouts. By the subsequent morning, he formally reported her disappearance to the police. This prompted the FBI's intervention, informing him that his wife was not who he believed her to be, and that her return was exceedingly improbable. This revelation proved devastating, not only to David, but to all who had known Anna Harper. Her work acquaintances were astonished. Her neighbors expressed disbelief, and her children, Emily and Michael, aged 6 and 4 respectively at the time of their mother's vanishing, were left with unanswered questions that would persist indefinitely. David Harper, for his part, cooperated fully with the FBI's inquiry, submitting to numerous interviews, granting agents access to search his residence, and providing records of financial transactions and private documents. The FBI ultimately concluded that David had been an unwitting participant, a man who genuinely believed he was married to a woman named Anna Kowaltis, who subsequently became Anna Harper, and who had no inkling that his wife was a Soviet operative. Nevertheless, this determination did little to alleviate the pain or the mortification of having been so thoroughly deceived. In the ensuing years, David Harper largely withdrew from public life, relocating to a different state with his children and attempting to reconstruct a life that had been demolished by betrayal. The FBI's investigation into Anna Harper, or Yelena Sokova, persisted for years following her disappearance, yet yielded minimal additional intelligence. The Soviet intermediary with whom she had collaborated was expelled from the United States as part of broader diplomatic repercussions. However, he was swiftly succeeded by another operative, and the network to which she belonged remained largely intact. The classified information she had absconded with was assessed for its potential fallout, and while certain reports were deemed valuable to the Soviets, none were considered catastrophic. She had conducted herself as a capable operative, though not a particularly brilliant one, and the intelligence she supplied, while useful, had not fundamentally altered the geopolitical balance of power during the Cold War. As for Yelena herself, she vanished into the Soviet apparatus and was never heard from again publicly. Unconfirmed reports suggest she was granted a new identity, possibly a new assignment, and continued her service to Soviet intelligence in some capacity, though these accounts remain unverified. Some former intelligence personnel who defected from the Soviet Union in subsequent years claim to have heard of her, characterizing her as a cautionary narrative employed in KGB training programs, an illustration of an operative who successfully maintained clandestine status for nearly a decade, but was ultimately compelled to forsake her entire existence due to a single misstep. Whether she ever contemplated the family she left behind, or if she experienced remorse, guilt, or any discernible emotion, remains unknown. The sole certainty is that she never attempted to contact David, Emily, or Michael, not even once. The case of Anna Harper, or Yelena Soliveira, is not an anomaly in the annals of Cold War espionage. Rather, it serves as a prime example of a particular operational model at which the Soviet Union excelled: the long-term deep cover agent. Such individuals were capable of embedding themselves within American society, establishing a life, forging relationships, and patiently accumulating intelligence over extended periods, even decades. These operatives were not ostentatious. They eschewed the glamorous persona of figures like James Bond, who might be depicted stealing nuclear codes or evading capture in high-performance vehicles. Instead, they were characterized by their patience, methodical approach, and willingness to invest immense time and effort for incremental gains. The psychological burden of this work was profound, demanding not only deception, but sustained, comprehensive deception, the kind that transforms an individual's entire existence into a performance. What renders this narrative particularly poignant is not the espionage itself, but the human toll it exacted. David Harper was compelled to confront the reality that the woman he had loved, the mother of his children, had never truly existed, or at least the version he knew was an elaborately constructed falsehood. Emily and Michael Harper matured without their mother, burdened by the knowledge that she had elected to abandon them rather than face the ramifications of her actions. And Yelena Sokolova, irrespective of her ultimate destination, had to live with the fact that she had left behind two children who would grow up posing questions she would never answer. The broader implications of the case were also significant. Anna Harper's successful evasion exposed considerable weaknesses in American security clearance protocols and background investigation procedures, deficiencies the FBI and other agencies diligently sought to rectify in the wake of her disappearance. It also amplified the prevailing paranoia that permeated counterintelligence operations during the Cold War, fostering the understanding that Soviet operatives could be present anywhere, integrated into any institution, leading seemingly ordinary lives while working against American interests. This apprehension was not entirely unfounded, as subsequent revelations concerning other Soviet agents operating within the United States during that era would later corroborate. However, it also contributed to an atmosphere of suspicion and mistrust that adversely affected countless innocent individuals who found themselves under scrutiny simply due to fitting a particular profile or possessing an unconventional background. In the years since the Cold War concluded, certain details pertaining to Yelena Sokova's operation have surfaced through declassified documents and interviews with former intelligence personnel. Nevertheless, substantial portions of her narrative remain cloaked in secrecy. The archives of the KGB, to the extent they still exist and are accessible, contain information that has never been publicly disclosed. It is highly probable that the complete truth regarding her mission, her motivations, and her ultimate fate will never be ascertained. What is known, however, is that she was an integral part of a vast clandestine conflict that unfolded not only on the global stage, but also within suburban living rooms, corporate offices, and elementary school parking lots. It was a conflict where the stakes were measured not merely in geopolitical terms, but in the irrevocably damaged lives of individuals caught in the crossfire. The question that persists, one that has never received a satisfactory answer, is what Yelena Sokolova believed she was fighting for. Was she a fervent adherent to communist ideology, a believer that the Soviet Union represented a superior future for humanity, and that her work, however ethically compromised, served that vision profoundly? Alternatively, Was she merely a product of a system that identified her as useful, molding her into a tool, an operative who followed directives as she had been trained without excessive contemplation of the repercussions? The reality likely lies somewhere between these extremes, a confluence of ideology, duty, and a degree of compartmentalization that enables individuals to commit reprehensible acts while still perceiving themselves as fundamentally good. Undeniably, she made a choice, and that choice generated consequences that radiated outward in ways she could not have fully foreseen. David Harper underwent years of therapy in an effort to process his experiences and to reconstruct his sense of trust and identity after being so comprehensively deceived. Emily Harper, possessing enough memories of her mother to recall them, matured with a complex amalgam of anger and bewilderment, perpetually struggling to reconcile the woman she remembered, the woman who read her bedtime stories and styled her hair, with the individual who had abandoned her without a flicker of hesitation. Michael Harper, too young to retain significant recollections, grew up with an intrinsic void, a lacuna in his life where a mother should have been, and the stark realization that she had deliberately chosen to leave him behind. Ultimately, Yelena Sokova's story represents a narrative about the price of deception, about the outcome when ideology and duty intersect with human relationships, and about the manner in which the Cold War, despite its intricate geopolitical complexities, was ultimately distilled down to individual people making personal decisions. Some of these choices were heroic, others tragic, and still others simply incomprehensible. This is a story that lacks a neat resolution or a clear moral lesson, because the reality of espionage, particularly during that era, was inherently messy and morally ambiguous. The individuals involved were rarely purely virtuous or entirely malevolent. They were simply people ensnared in circumstances far larger than themselves, endeavoring to navigate impossible situations with incomplete information and conflicting allegiances. Anna Harper departed her residence on a Friday morning in October 1983 and never returned. The repercussions of that choice continue to resonate decades later, impacting the individuals she abandoned. Within the records of intelligence organizations, diligent efforts persist to decipher her actions and motivations. And in the chronicle of a war that shaped a whole generation, she transformed into a phantom, a specter, a somber warning. Regardless of the existence she forged for herself after that fateful morning, it was a life overshadowed by the consciousness of having betrayed every individual who had placed their faith in her, with no possibility of reversal. Never. The inquiry remains officially unresolved, despite the improbability of any fresh revelations surfacing at this juncture. David Harper departed in 2019, never having remarried and dedicating the concluding years of his existence as a man marked by a subdued resentment, seldom discussing his prior experiences. Emily and Michael Harper, now approaching their 50s, have consistently rebuffed all interview solicitations throughout the years, opting instead to let the past remain undisturbed. And Yelena Sokolova, should she still be living, would now be in her late 70s, residing somewhere within the former Soviet Union under an undisclosed identity. She carries with her the recollection of a life previously lived and a family once possessed, along with the realization that none of it was ever genuine, or at least not in the manner it ought to have been. This narrative recounts the tale of the woman who disappeared, the lives she left in her wake, and the enduring enigmas that will likely remain perpetually unsolved.